Richard Harrow. Some call him the original John Wick, and others might simply call him the best character in Boardwalk Empire. But there's one question that I hear from us fans more than others, and that question is Richard Harrow a monster? Richard's appearance was one of the reasons he thought he was a monster, but I want to know if y'all thought he was a monster, and honestly, I'm a bit on the fence myself. So let's go through some of Richard's key moments in the show and see if they're actions of a monster or a loyal soldier. Now let's analyze why Richard did what he did, who Richard did it to, and how the situation affected Richard's character in general. If you enjoy content like this, like the video and subscribe to the channel for more of my videos. I would really appreciate it. But it's your boy Evan loud and clear. I want to thank y'all for being here. Let's get into it. Now, I did a video on Richard's story in the show, and I briefly talked about him being a monster, but some of the conversation from y'all in the comment section was great, so I'll be showing y'all some love throughout the video, so keep an eye out. Richard's first big moment is when he helps Jimmy take out Liam. Now, the reason Jimmy had Richard take him out is because he slashed Pearl's face. Now, I believe this situation affected Richard in a positive way, and let me tell y'all why. Let's go back to when Jimmy and Richard literally first saw each other. Richard was a broken man, and I hate to say this, but I think as fans, we can admit that if Richard hadn't met Jimmy when he did, Richard's attempt to take his own life would have came a lot sooner than it did. Jimmy gave Richard purpose with this mission. Richard felt alive again after this. Richard avenged the death of Pearl, who was an innocent bystander caught in the middle. And one of the biggest arguments about Richard is that, yeah, he takes out a lot of people, but maybe he does it for the right reasons, and it's up to us fans to decide if that makes him a monster or not. But in the case of Liam, I am deeming Richard Harrow a loyal soldier. Richard's next big moment was with the Dlesio Brothers. Now there's a few different parts of this we need to discuss, y'all. In the war between Rothstein and Nucky Thompson, Jimmy was given the task of finding and taking out the Dlesio Brothers. Now he eventually did that, but while Jimmy was looking for the brothers, Richard had a suggestion on how to find them. Richard offered to travel to Philadelphia, where the brothers were from. There, he would track down the mother, two sisters, and other brother who was a dentist, and he would unalive them. Now, thank God, Jimmy knew how crazy that was, and he pretty much more or less told Richard, nah, that's not going to be necessary, man. Richard did end up unaliving two of the brothers, one of them being a kid. Now, when it comes to this being the act of a monster or a loyal soldier, I mean, golly, it's hard to look past the fact that Richard would come up with such a heinous plan. I mean, to unalive 3 women and a man, all innocent, just to get to the brothers? Nah, man, that's very, very monstrous. But the thing is, he didn't go through with it. And when it comes to the 2 brothers that he did get to, that's war. And for anyone who tells me, well, Evan, maybe he should have spared the kid. The kid is going to grow up one day, and he's not going to forget who took out his family, so unfortunately, he had to go as well. And I don't think this moment affected Richard as heavily as some of the others. I think he saw this as taking and executing orders. So in the case of the Dlesio Brothers, I am deeming Richard Harrow a loyal soldier, and hear me out. If he had gone through with the unaliving of all the innocent people, the mother, the sisters, and the other brother, yes, this would have been a monstrous act, but instead, it was just a very monstrous thought that didn't end up happening. Another big moment for Richard is when he unalives Manny Horvitz. This was an act of retribution by Richard. Richard stated that he didn't go after Manny because of what happened with Jimmy, but because of Angela Darmody, Jimmy's wife. Angela was one of the people who was always kind to Richard, so it was absolutely perfect that Richard was the one to avenge her. Now, just like the first moment with Liam, this affected Richard in a positive way. he got to avenge an innocent bystander. This time, it was someone who was close to him. In the case of Manny Horvitz, I am deeming Richard Harrow a loyal soldier, and this, in my opinion, was one of his best jobs, but well, let's keep going. The next big moment for Richard was the showdown at the Artemis Hotel. Richard Harrow had one thing and one thing only on his mind: rescue Tommy and unalive anyone that gets in his way. And man, oh man, did he do just that. Richard ended up rescuing Tommy and leaving a bloody trail of bodies in his path. Now let's analyze the good and the ugly. Well, obviously the ugly is the unaliving of multiple people here. However, the reason Richard did what he did was very honorable. Even though it was a massacre, if it wasn't for Richard, who knows what would have happened to Tommy? Because if y'all remember, Gyp Rossetti injected Jillian with illegal substances and she was useless. Well, at least more useless than she normally is. So Richard was Tommy's only hope, and Richard didn't let Tommy down. Now we might automatically assume that this had a similar effect on Richard as the unaliving of Liam and maybe Manny, but I think Richard was at a crossroads here. On one hand, he saved Tommy from the Artemis Club. On the other hand, he unalived at least 10 people. So I think Richard was having an internal battle trying to justify his actions. But be that as it may, in the case of Richard Harrow and the Artemis Hotel, I am deeming Richard Harrow a loyal soldier. Yep. The next moment I'd like to talk about is Richard and his bounty hunting for Carl Billings. Now, if y'all remember, after the incident at the Artemis Hotel, Richard left Atlantic City and met a man named Carl Billings. Richard agreed to be a hitman for Carl, as he told Carl that's all he was good at doing. Now, we can look at these guys and maybe make the assumption they're up to no good, considering that most of the characters in Boardwalk Empire are up to no good, but they still didn't know Richard. Richard didn't know them, and Richard unalived both the men for someone else. Now, this poor guy right here, I mean, come on, y'all. What do y'all think this guy could have done so bad to deserve Richard Harrow coming to his office? And the third guy, I mean, well, Richard let him go, but the damage was already done, man. This affected Richard in a terribly negative way. It was right after the massacre at the Artemis Club where he was already mentally lost, and the bounty hunting drove him further into monstrosity. So when it comes to Richard Harrow and the bounty hunter killings, I gotta deem Richard Harrow a monster here. The last moment I'd like to discuss is Richard unaliving Maybelle. And this one is very tough, y'all, because we know what the outcome was, right? And that was Richard accidentally unalived Maybelle, trying to go after Dr. Narcisse. Richard, for the first time in the show, at least while he was pointing the gun at somebody else, he had a moment of doubt, and it cost Maybelle her life. It affected Richard because he ended up getting shot and losing his life under the boardwalk, and in his final moments, I think he had realized that he became the monster he was so desperately trying to escape becoming. I mean, there's no sugarcoating it, y'all. In the case of Richard Harrow and Maybelle, I gotta deem Richard Harrow a monster. Whether you believe Richard Harrow was a monster or whether you believe he was a loyal soldier, I think there's one thing that we as fans can all agree on. Richard Harrow was one of the best characters, not just in Boardwalk Empire, but television show history. Yeah, that's right, I said it. Television show history. And it's so dope to see that there's so many people out there who like the character as much as I did. Now let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Was Richard Harrow a monster or a loyal soldier? This is hard, y'all. I truly don't think that there is one or the other with Richard. A lot of people say Richard is a product of his environment. But I think Richard was a product of whatever circumstance or situation he was in at the moment. If he was in a situation where he needed to be a monster, then that's what he was. If he was in a position to act as a loyal soldier, executing orders, then that's what he was. If you're not going to call him a loyal soldier, the guy is the perfect monster. Either way, Richard was one of a kind, and it's always great to do things like this about him. I really enjoyed doing this video, and I really appreciate y'all for taking the time to watch. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more videos in the future. But it's your boy Evan loud and clear. I'm out of here.